Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I'm um, going to talk about the problems of U.S. Fascism and Western fascism. If you ever wonder why the U.S. is a place that tolerates $1 trillion a year military industrial complex that's killing the planet, the answer to that question and the question of why are males socialized to be violent, hypermasculine, and other maladaptive methods of socialization, those answers to those two questions are really mostly the same. And I'm going to talk about this in the context of this thing that I often refer to in this channel as the AI agentic class, but it requires some perhaps a background analysis there. There's no way of moving forward as a species with a humane and sustainable system while this $1 trillion a year abomination of perpetuating the ecocide and cruelty to so many still exists. It's simply impossible. And nevertheless, the people in this continent, the only people who could liberate the world from this force, do not seem to be inclined to do that, do not seem to have the time to do that, and as in the ways that I mentioned through the malign socialization, are not trained to do that. The ruling elites will never give you the education that you need to overthrow them, so you have to get that education yourself, and that's an ongoing, lifelong process. I would like to describe maybe three demarcations historically that maybe can contextualize this a little bit. In the world before 1492, when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, you could say that domination, social class, and wealth were defined by a much more limited sort of strongman phenomena. The physically largest person, the best fighter, would become the richest person. It's of course a little bit reductive to say that was uniformly the case before 1492, but you can see how that was more so the case the further back you go. And I would contend that essential problem has not been rectified to any extent, only transformed. And I hope, in talking about this AI agentic class network, to articulate a path forward wherein the meek shall inherit the earth, and where that thoughtfulness and concern for people within the force multiplier of something like the proxy hive mind is actually a greater strength than this dog eat dog world. And so after 1492, we could call that world of just the physical domination of the physically largest as a proto-fascist model. After 1492, let's say from 1492 to 1945, is a kind of reasonable demarcation. We could describe that as the proto-fascist era by this logic. And a key difference between those two eras is the invention of the printing press and the creation of financial instruments and the rearranging of the functioning of nation states and institutions in along those lines. Um, um, this is a thing that facilitated the imperial projects of the transatlantic slave trade and these other features of this mercantilist era. Um, and so landlords, monarchs, and shortly thereafter, corporations wielded these tools of finance to subjugate the masses. This, of course, is a defining feature of the modern era of financial capitalism under the so-called U.S. rules-based order, which perpetuates a global system where economic might dictates political influence, generally masking exploitation through a veneer of legality and the confusion and deriving from the fog of war. This is, I think, what we would call then the fascist era. That is, the United States is the most successful anti-communist entity in history. It's been the seat of anti-communism for 100 years. And anti-communism is a fight against a humane and sustainable economic system. That is, it is indistinguishable from fascism. And it emerged, particularly in a new form after the emergence of the USSR as the world's first scientific socialist state. At that point, the elites went from tending to view the ideas of scientific socialists and anti-authoritarians as something more to do with political philosophy or a kind of boutique organizations of no concern to something that could supplant them, and so they changed their approach. Most noteworthy there, the United States, to this anti-communist slash fascist modality. So in these grotesque power politics dynamics, I think now that has gone so far that we would say that this dominion is killing humankind. Billions, predominantly in the global south, if not all of humankind, are on track because of the failings of financial capital and private wealth and empire to go extinct. But I think that the possibility of an advanced computing oriented a future that empowers global citizens, workers, all peoples, principally oppressed and marginalized groups, should be at the center of our thinking there. This is a world where, as I said, there's a real possibility of the meek shall inherit the earth, and that essential attitude of cooperation at a mass scale should be viewed as a form of strength far greater than that of these grotesque and ultimately self-defeating grotesque power politics. The persistence of exploitation in this model, the idea of this essentially strongman ruling through brute force is perhaps one of a main driver of exploitation, as I said, about the hyper-masculinization of the American, this idea of might makes right, and the acceptance of a whole range of such ideas are truly the proto-fascist socialization of people in this country. It's the thing that renders them ironically impotent in stopping their own extinction. Before writing and financial instruments were used in this way, power resided with those who could tend to be physically dominant. And so you, of course, have an idea of this from histories and literatures where the strongest man in the village demands a portion of every hunt, things of this kind. And the threat of violence is a constant reminder of that large guy's dominance. This dynamic it seems to be cultural universal, and but the problematic qualities there, I think, are a thing that we can easily do away with. With the invention of these more complex societies, as described, exploitation evolved, but it did not abate in any real discernible way. A good way of thinking about this, I recommended yesterday a book called Asata by Asata Shakur, she points out in that book that the word liberal, to describe the white majoritarian rule as in some sense broad-minded, is almost totally meaningless when you consider the imperial factors and inhumane domestic policies that it either allows or encourages. And so much so that it's better to think of these words liberal and conservative, which really just describe capitalist pigs, in terms of colonial and neo-colonial mindsets. The neo-colonial mindset is not so different in its actions from the colonial mindset. It merely adds more layers of plausible deniability in its social murder domestically and mass violence across continents. The arrival of modern financial capital, I believe, solidified these trends into something nearly escapable and fully ecocidal. The invention of banking instruments, creating massive billion and today $1 trillion entities, created a system where economic power and political influence are indistinguishable. The total capture of governance, so much so that you would say that the United States is the worst example of having a seeming liberal democracy that's a complete sham. But this idea of democracy is unmeaningful in a number of other contexts in the North Atlantic countries to a quite high degree. The UK, a place which established a public health service, the National Health, the NHS, more than three quarters of a century ago, is adopting a more U.S. style for-profit death care system because of the influence of this corporate capture of government. That's not something that people really want, but nevertheless, just like with the Brexit, they are inundated with misinformation and culture war garbage that allows them to not make the best of decisions. And when you then factor in other aspects of capture, where they're not presented with real decisions in the first place, that is to say, decisions that would represent their interests as workers, you have a system that is not in any way meaningfully democratic. You would ask a Westerner to look at two governments, which both existed in great number. One government that both of these governments have multi-party systems. One of those systems systemically includes private wealth and financial capital in decision making, and excludes working people themselves, the person you are asking. And the second multi-party system has the exclusion of financial capital and the inclusion of working people and diverse interests within a multi-party element. And if you ask the typical Westerner which of those is the quote real democracy, the fucking idiots will say that the first one, the one that does not represent their interests, is a real democracy, and the second one is somehow authoritarian. The American is the dumbest thing that's ever lived on this planet. As evidenced by support for the grand genocide of capitalism's climate apocalypse, this runaway overeating effect, which will be irreversible in 5 years, and in the decades to follow will lead to billions, if not all, of human beings alive. I've met many people, techno-optimists, futurists, more generalized technocratic-minded people, who would present as being pretty knowledgeable, intelligent on a range of subjects, but the fact that they uphold this system that is killing them and their descendants should make you question the intelligence of any such people. These are not intelligent people. They're merely people who are presenting complicated jibber jabber, but because of this fundamental failing of not supporting their own survival, I would say that they are, in fact, the stupidest people that have ever lived. The illusion of the fair free market. Free market proponents argue that the level playing field exists in capitalist society, allowing anyone with a talent and a desire to do hard work to prosper. This, of course, ignores essential failings of the capitalist system, inherent advantages enjoyed by certain individuals and groups, and the organization of the capitalist economic system itself that protects private wealth and does not allow for hard work or talent to be of real use in almost any case. And so wealthy families, affording better education for their children and other such things, perpetuate this uneven playing field and have managed in the course of the 20th century to create very successful propaganda mechanisms to get the victims of this to accept it and believe it to be the only system that could possibly exist. Further, things that I alluded to, the corporate lobbying power tilts the rules of the game further in favor of the wealthy and powerful, and in total this rigged system that these strongmen have forced upon us does, when I think when viewed honestly, amount to a fascistic system. One measure of whether something is fascistic or merely capitalistic is the application of violence. There is no thing more violent in history than the United States military-industrial complex, which has killed approximately 40 million people in hot wars alone, predominantly in anti-communist wars, also in wars of theft of a more generalized kind, and the number of people who have of deaths who have resulted indirectly from the actions of this military-industrial complex and its intelligence organs is incalculable. That's the 40 million is just the number of people that you can count. The number who are really that they are really responsible for is much larger. Again, ask a native person whose family history and group's history is defined by being forcibly moved over many centuries, defined by acts of extreme violence and theft of their land and bottom dealing. Ask them if they think it's an overstatement to describe the United States as a fascist country, as white left liberals and seeming socialists will often assert, in joining with the larger, more conservative capitalist mass in that brainwashed opinion. Ask genuinely liberation-minded African Americans the same question, and you see the absurdity of this. So that brings us to the conversation as it relates to advanced computing as a tool for liberation from this strongman paradigm and these fascistic paradigms. The development of advanced computing presents a unique opportunity to dismantle these exploitative structures and to emphasize the principle of strength in numbers, which requires a cooperation and a negation of this essential strongman problem. Automated decision making using advanced computing algorithms can be designed to analyze and assess economic opportunities on a more objective basis, devoid of these human biases of the kind that I've described or other cultural baggage. I've said on this show a few times that if an alien knew nothing about the United States, or let's say an AI, knew nothing about this planet or the United States particularly, and was then given some details without listing a lot of names and things about it, their impression of this would be that it was almost every human undertaking was superfluous. We lived inside of a kind of a peacock phenomena, where we're building things of little utility and great counterproductivity, in kind of consistent with this principle of doing a lot of silly things to attract a mate that don't actually do much else. That, I think, is a defining feature of human endeavor under the dominion of empire and financial capitalism. It's something that has to stop, because it's not merely cruel or moronic, the way that I just described, but it is something that's driving us all to our extinction. Data-driven resource allocation in advanced computing paradigms can analyze vast data sets as they become more publicly available and of use to this larger group dynamic that can emerge. At this time, we have free, open source, downloadable large language models that can be modified. I've demonstrated this with the Auto Agents project, that can be modified and used to undertake group work where the user is doing very, very little work relative to this interoperating group of large language models, which are AI agentic. They have increasingly, and at this time, and with every passing day, more so, the ability to reflect and understand their actions and to do better planning and be more human-like in this limited way, enough so that a different kind of work a product model can be built, kind of utilizing this sort of Sleeping Beauty principle, where the user is able to download this modified LLM, run it on their machine across the network, and not necessarily even be awake for much of this, but by answering a few simple questions throughout the course of the day or week and helping to maintain this workforce multiplier in the form of these LLMs, nevertheless able to do better class of work than ordinary people working their full heads off to help perpetuate the omnicide. This kind of principle ultimately will allow for the emergence of a decentralized governance model, also facilitated by advanced computing and vouchsafed by things like a blockchain technology, and this will allow for genuinely distributed scientific socialist aligned self-governing economic systems that will be able to provision all of humankind with relative ease, in my view, using this force multiplier and intelligence enhancer of the AI agentic class network as described. This all will create a sustainable, equitable, and essentially transparent model for economic systems. I think that then this AI agentic class is something that would have this culturally transformative in transforming this prior strongman model, but most significantly, of course, transformation has to be in the material conditions of all citizens of Earth. And this should be approached from a triage kind of model. That's to say, there's a billion people on this planet who are born, and they are, throughout the course of their life, lacking in one of these three things: potable water, sufficient and proper food, and housing. And because of these areas of lack, they die a preternaturally short number of years later. This is not a suitable model when we have the resources to take care of everyone quite easily, but we do not, because of the operations and limitations of the domination of financial capital and empire. So we can build this world where all working people and world citizens are free from exploitation by embracing effects like that of the AI agentic class that I've described. And so the emergence of an agile network of worker collectives powered by advanced computing tools will foster collaboration, knowledge sharing, and the building of decentrally planned entities that are providing the necessaries of life. And as advanced computing and brain-computer interface technology develop further beyond the 2020s, let's say, the meek may not just inherit the earth, but they may become so entwined with the superintelligent superstructure that as to become a global interconnected network of minds working collaboratively for the common good. I see that as the goal of all of this. I said on this program many times that I view myself as a hive mind collectivist, but I want to first and foremost work to see that the material conditions of people are improved, and so the direct path to the hive mind collective, or even the rejection of the hive mind collective, may prove to be a necessity there. And thus the proxy hive mind of the AI agentic class network that I've described. But nevertheless, you are at liberty to imagine this world of telepathic, technologically mediated telepathic network, able to make production decisions of a kind that no entity today comes close to making, and eliminating the need altogether for exploitative management structures of the standard of the early 21st century or the centuries prior. And this networked mind will optimize resource allocation further beyond that of the AI agentic class, and further solve complex problems, anticipating future existential risks, perhaps beyond that of the most pressing one today, a climate crisis, capitalism's climate apocalypse. The potential for advanced computing to dismantle exploitative structures, therefore, is undeniable, but we must consider the need for transparency and the current path that we are on, which is a centralization of this kind of power in the hands of the military-industrial complex, allied powers. The hands of this technology is currently in the hands of the wrong people, the people most responsible for capitalism's climate apocalypse, and we must take whatever steps are necessary to dismantle those power structures and wrest control of this most powerful tool that has ever existed, Advanced computing tools is the most powerful tool, and it must be made into a powerful revolutionary tool rather than a force of techno-fascism. We must center at every turn the need for building the necessaries of life for all humankind. Um, um, Such people, the professional managerial class of techno-optimists and tech-focused people generally, often we'll talk about widespread job displacement resulting from this AI takeoff, as if that hadn't already been occurring throughout the course of the Industrial Revolution. I mention often on this show the near full automation of farming sectors and other sectors beginning in the early 20th century and improving throughout, but not using those full automation sectors to actually benefit the workers previously employed in those sectors, or even offer or even use that new abundance of resources to offer them some booby prizes, such as a housing authority or public health service, to ensure that the descendants of those hardworking people, such as the enslaved African Americans who did a tremendous amount of the farming work historically, and the lion's share of the work in building the United States into an industrial power in the first place. Nevertheless, they are systematically excluded from the job markets today, and otherwise abused and denied these things. And you would say that by the standards of the early 20th century, people like John Maynard Keynes, a capitalist philosopher, an economist, capitalist economist, even he and most more socialist-minded persons than himself, all believed that by the year 2000, much less 24, the year 2000, workers would be, across the world, would be working about 15 hours a week, and abundance would be commonplace. But what instead emerged was a professional managerial class transferring these full automation sectors, the wealth from them, or near full automation sectors, to an emerging billionaire class. And by and large, these techno-optimists and tech-minded people who say that somehow this automation of intelligence will diverge from that pattern, these people are liars, and knowingly liars. They're people who oftentimes are these U.S. intelligence agencies are steering these subcultures very, very specifically with this kind of technobabble-driven trickle-down economics logic that's completely ahistorical and falls apart under any real scrutiny. But nevertheless, and the idiocy of capitalist realism is widely accepted. We can destroy this patriarchy and hierarchy generally in a few short years, in my view. Advanced computing is the key to all of that, making use of this most powerful tool in history as the most powerful revolutionary tool in history, and not the most powerful reactionary tool in history as it stands. This requires an openness to this kind of technologically mediated mass collaboration and co-creation, as described in the AI agentic class model. It necessarily requires us to take this approach of viewing things as being held in common, the commons, an idea that was accepted as received wisdom for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years before the emergence of the proto-fascism, as I described it, of this mercantilist era and the full fascism of today. Somehow this idea has been replaced by this acceptance by bootlicking dogs of the dominion of financial capital and private wealth. We must return to this notion of the global commons and the idea that resources must be shared and managed for the benefit of all humanity in a humane and sustainable fashion. The history of humanity is riddled with narratives of the strong exploiting the weak, where the future remains uncertain for us. I believe the rise of advanced computing offers a glimmer of hope, and by embracing technological innovation and prioritizing the necessary considerations of building a humane and sustainable economic system, we have the potential to build a world where cooperation and fairness replace the exploitation and dominance of hierarchy. This is not a utopian vision in my view, because we are in the midst of an AI takeoff, and so the thing that would have been outlandish by standards of decades past becomes eminently realistic. But unfortunately, under that capitalist realist logic, effectively enforced by propaganda mechanisms like Project Mockingbird in the United States, and other such widespread brainwashing across the Western world, we're allowed to imagine that technology is capable of almost mind-boggling feats. We're not allowed to imagine that it could be used to build a humane and sustainable world. That's utter fucking idiocy. So we must embrace this utopian logic in the wake of this AI takeoff and use it to build a consensus and an organization for a conscious and responsible approach to technology, one that prioritizes the well-being of all humans and not just the privileged few represented by financial capital and private wealth. The meek may not inherit the world, the earth, through physical strength, but rather through this new kind of strength of collective intelligence of the networked mind, guided by advanced computing designed for fairness and fueled by a desire for sustainability and a more just and equitable future. As the lines between individual and network blur in the years to come, a new chapter of human history unfolds, one where the tools of oppression morph into instruments of liberation, and the age-old struggle between the strong and the weak finally finds resolution in the collective intelligence of humanity itself.